Welcome to Human Anatomy and Physiology 1 here at Gonzaga University. I'm Steve Conant, and I'm the lab specialist for the Department of Human Physiology. I want to begin today by looking at the syllabus and our Blackboard site. So on the syllabus, I want to point out a couple different things here. Every week, there will be 2 different open lab times that every student enrolled for HPHY 241L is welcome to attend. So on Tuesday mornings from 10:30 to noon, there's open lab time. And then on Wednesday from 9 a.m. to 10:30, there's also open lab time. Now if I scroll down to the schedule for the course, there are also some other open lab times as we approach the midterm and the final in the course. So here you can see an open lab time listed, and this is going to be actually 3.5 hours on the Friday before the midterm. So it's 10 a.m. to noon and then 2:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. And as you can see, again, in the end of October, we have another Friday with the same hours. And then in the beginning of November, there's another Friday. And then the week of Thanksgiving, we don't have labs. I am taking this time to actually open up the lab for 5 hours on Tuesday the 24th and open it up also for 4 hours on Wednesday the 25th. So please consider staying for these open lab times and don't jet out of town before the Thanksgiving holiday actually starts. You will find that these open lab times are very useful, as we have a number of pieces of technology and software that are really only accessible while you're in the lab. So your best study time is going to be in our labs. Okay, now I want to take a quick look at our Blackboard site. The Blackboard sites for all the sections are going to be very similar. This is how your instructor will email you, and how they'll also maybe set up discussion boards and especially share the content. So I want to go to the content section here. If you are in another instructor's section, you will probably see your section number listed. I merge all of my courses because I have 7 sections this semester, so it makes it more efficient for me to upload things only one time or send an email only one time. Clicking on the content area here, you will see something similar to this when you go to your content area this week. You'll definitely see the course syllabus, and you'll likely see Lab 1 content folder. These are set to be released on the Tuesday prior to a lab. So because we have Lab 1 next week, you will see this information available on Tuesday of that week. So I am, of course, making the Lab 1 content video right now. So what I'm going to do is go to one of the complete folders, Lab 3 content over here. Now what you'll see in Lab 3 is that we have 3 files up top here, and these will all be released the Tuesday prior to your lab. So this is a PreLab PowerPoint. It's a static file that you're able to go through at your own pace, and of course see the content that you'll encounter in lab that week. And then the PreLab video is one of our instructors from the Department of Human Physiology talking through that week's content. So think of it as a mini lecture. These are about 15 to 45 minutes. They'll often cover the content, and they'll sometimes cover procedures that are in lab. Sometimes you may even have another short video that'll cover some of the equipment that you'll learn that week. Now, the lab workbook is something different from the lab manual that you actually purchased at the bookstore. You will need your lab manual. We'll work on review exercises almost every week in the lab manual. However, the workbook is more so a guide for the technology pieces and the software that we've chosen to use in our labs at Gonzaga. So this is basically a guide. It's something you're going to work on each week with your lab group, and we're going to check this for completion at the beginning of the next week's lab. Digressing just a little bit here, this PreLab video will feature information that will actually be on each of the quizzes that are going to be at the beginning of lab. Next week you don't have a quiz, but every other week you will have a quiz. So make sure you watch this lab video before you come to lab. On the Friday following labs, you will also see answer keys posted from the lab manual, the book you bought in the bookstore. And maybe we will post unlabeled images so that you can actually use those to study. So please familiarize yourself with this Blackboard site. It's going to be very useful. It's actually going to be crucial during the semester to do well in the course that you're observing when this information is up and using it on the schedule that we are specifying. Okay, let's go back and take a look at our PowerPoint again here. And I'm going to make this a really short video. It's some pretty basic information. What we're going to do is start with the language of anatomy. So the way that we discuss with someone else how something is in the body or where it is in the body. And then I'm just going to touch on the organ systems review. So we'll mention briefly all the different organ systems that throughout this year you will learn in depth. So let's begin here. So just again in this first pre-lab content, here are the different times of open lab. The objectives for this week's lab are going to be describe the anatomical position verbally or by demonstration and explain its importance. We are going to learn to use proper anatomical terminology to describe the body directions, planes, and surfaces. We'll name the body cavities and indicate the important organs that belong in each. And we'll name the human organ systems and indicate the major functions of those systems. You should be able to list 2 or 3 organs for each system and categorize various organs by organ system. We'll also be able to identify these organs in a dissectable human torso model that we have in the lab. And finally, to identify the correct organ system for each organ when presented with a list of organs. So those are the objectives. It will be, as I said, for most people, an overview. Some of the information may be new. So you'll enjoy this slow start to lab. It gets more challenging as we move on. So these are really the different areas that I think that we're looking at this week. First of all, the surface anatomy. So you can describe to somebody, when you're looking at the surface of the body, where you might expect to see the heart, the lungs, different things that lie underneath. The orientation and direction, so where one part of the body lies in relation to another. And then we have planes of the body. So when we're looking at slides or MRI images, we want to understand how the body was cut to actually, virtually cut to actually get these images so we know where we're looking. And then finally the body cavities, so where we expect to find different organs in each of the different body cavities. Okay, so these terms here are some things that you're going to want to familiarize yourself with, and I'm not going to talk through them today, but this is where we're going after for your general language next week of surface anatomy. So when you look at the body, you should understand where the abdominal region is, and so on and so forth. We'll cover this in lab next week. Here is a diagram just going over these different areas. So as you can see, we are already encountering an awful lot of terms. Many of these terms are Latin terms that are going to be challenging to pronounce. Fortunately, they are usually spelled like they sound. So once you get the pronunciation down, the spelling will come along with that as well. So this is anatomical position. It's a man standing upright and his palms are facing forwards. So this is anatomical position, and this is the way that we would describe where, say, the elbow is in relation to the shoulder from this position. We have times when a human moves out of this position, whether they be a healthy human and we're trying to describe the relation from a biomechanical analysis standpoint, or we might have an emergency situation where the person is in a position unlike anatomical position, but we still want to describe where we might find a laceration or a wound related to another portion of the body. In a nutshell, that's anatomical position and why it's important. Now, in describing the body orientation and direction, we then have terms that are going to be given in relation to something else. So I could say the head is superior to the neck. Conversely, I could say the neck is inferior to the head. Anterior refers to the front of the body. Posterior refers to the back. Medial and lateral are a little bit different. What they refer to is the midline of the body. So when something is called medial, it's closer to the midline than something that is lateral to that. Cephalad and caudal are good examples of Latin terms that you'll hear. Cephalad means cranial or head, and caudal means tail. Dorsal and ventral are actually used for animals versus humans, and I have a picture detailing this in a few slides. Proximal and distal are mostly used with the limb. So with proximal, we'd be talking about closer to where that limb originates from the torso. And distal, we'd be talking about further away. For example, our fingers are distal to our elbow. And superficial and deep are usually used for internal or external organs. So when we look at the skin, we say that that's superficial to the rib cage. Conversely, the rib cage is deep to the skin. So all of these terms are used in relation to something else. You'll practice this in lab. You'll answer some questions in your review exercise at the end of Chapter 1 in your lab manual. Okay, so here's just some tables that are going to be helpful. This is a visual description of what I just talked about. And now to bring it home in the situation where we have somebody out of anatomical position, but we still want to use these terms to describe them. So I've chosen here Tom Brady, and that is Michael Strahan about to sack Tom Brady. What we're looking at here is, even though Tom is turned to his side, what we're seeing is that superior is up towards his head, inferior is down towards his feet. The anterior side of him is trying to get away from Michael Strahan, while the posterior side is dealing with the brunt of Michael Strahan about to sack him. Now, it's also looking at his leg, and what we can see here is the hip is more proximal than the knee, which is distal. Just a couple of examples. Now, if we're talking about an animal, we're going to use some different terms, but you can look at it in kind of the same way. So this is actually one of my two dogs. This is a picture that I like to call Smooth Criminal. If you can figure out what she's got going on here, is she was licking the grill, and she actually got her dog tag stuck in the grill and was reluctant to come when I called her, but there she was, clang, 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 and the grill is stuck to her. So that's my dog Rally. And here with Rally, what we're looking at is her dorsal side is her back, so that's the superior side. Think of the dorsal fin on the shark. And then the ventral side is going to be the belly, so underneath. Anterior is towards her head, and posterior is towards her tail. And with animals, you'll also hear the terms cephalad and caudal. Caudal, again, tail, cephalad, head. So this slide shows the planes of the body that I alluded to before. Here we have the frontal plane dissecting the body into an anterior and posterior portion. The transverse plane separates the body into a superior and inferior portion, and the median plane separates the body into a left and right. When we actually go right down the middle of the body, then we get what's called a mid-sagittal plane. This median plane can also be called the sagittal plane. When we're right down the middle, though, mid-sagittal plane. And here you have some MRI images that are actually cut from these. So here the frontal plane, we can see that the body's been cut into a front and back, and we're actually looking in at the heart and the stomach and the liver and the spleen. Here we're looking at a transverse section, and this is going to cut the body into a superior and inferior. And here we can see the spinal cord towards the posterior side, while we can see the pancreas up towards the anterior side. Then here the median, and this is specifically a mid-sagittal plane, actually shows us cutting the vertebral column directly in half, And here we can see the rectum towards the posterior side and the intestines towards the anterior side. So I've used that anatomical language to describe where these organs are when we're looking at the different planes. Even though the person from where we're viewing is not in the anterior or anatomical position, we can still refer to these terms and talk about this as if the person were. Here are some of the cavities, and during this week in lab, you're going to figure out where the organs from different systems of the body actually belong in these cavities. You'll also begin to understand where the cavities lie in relation to one another. When we're talking about surface anatomy, it's useful to actually separate the body first into quadrants. So if somebody's having some pain in a certain area, we may actually do a surface exam where what we feel is distension in a certain area. And if we say we have distension in the left lower quadrant, you can recognize that the small intestine, the large intestine, and the bladder might be in that area. So this is useful when we're not actually inside looking at the body and we're observing from the outside and describing where something might be. To separate it even more, we have different regions that are going to be broken into 9 different areas, and we'll want you to recognize where you'll find different organs, and maybe something like the liver might be in 2 regions. If you're asked for that, you'd list both of the regions where these are, and these regions actually have names. So some of them, as you learn your anatomy, are going to be pretty easy to remember. Some of them are going to be more challenging to remember. But we'll get through it by the end of this week's lab. And here is all the organ systems that we'll look at this year. We have the integumentary system, which is the skin, the nails, the hair, the things that we can see from the outside of the body for the most part. Then we have the muscular system, and this is going to be our muscles that actually help us to move and do a lot of things, thermoregulate. There's a number of things that we'll actually encounter when we get to the muscular system in about a month. The endocrine system, this is what we think of when we think of a slow communication system of the hormones in the body. So regulation within the body has the endocrine system to thank as well as the nervous system. When we have something going away from homeostasis, the endocrine system works to fine-tune that in some ways. The lymphatic system is going to be our defense system. The digestive system is going to be the way that we actually bring in and process food in the body. The skeletal system is, of course, what we hook our muscles to, and we're able to move by that. But you'll find out that the skeletal system is very dynamic and has a number of different functions. And we'll cover that in the month of September. The nervous system is going to be our fast communication system. In this, we, of course, think of the brain and the spinal cord, but we have nerves in the peripheral nervous system that go all over our body as well. We'll cover this right at the end of the semester. It's our last system that we discuss. The cardiovascular system, of course, is the way that we get blood and nourishment to all of our working organs and muscles in the body. We'll cover that at the beginning of HPHY 242, or Human Anatomy and Physiology 2 in the spring. The respiratory system is the way by which we actually bring oxygen into our body and get rid of the gaseous waste product of CO2. And the urinary system is one of our waste systems to rid our body of liquid wastes. And finally, the reproductive system is, of course, the way that we all came to be. So the way that humans reproduce comes from the reproductive system. Now, there's a number of other slides that you'll see. You can go through these. It's an overview of what I just said. So I'm not going to make this video go over too much over 20 minutes. And I look forward to meeting you all next week in lab, or maybe the week after that if you're not in my lab. But be ready for the semester. So this is a very challenging course for all students. You need to, on day one, be ready to have a study regime in place. So you need to know what you're going to do in order to work through this course. We have one midterm and one final this semester. You will have a series of quizzes throughout the semester, but the midterm and the final, it is very important that you do well on your first midterm. So take this course seriously. It's going to be a lot of fun this year. It's very interesting. Just make sure that you're ready to study and recognize that this might be a course that's more challenging than anything you've ever taken. I hope that's not true for everyone, but you will enjoy it. So I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great week and weekend until that point, and take care.